Before President Biden began his NATO address tonight, 14 Democrats in the House and Senate had already called for him to drop out of the race. By the time he answered the final question of his news conference, that number had risen to 16. Among the Democrats joining those calls tonight is Congressman Jim Himes, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, who is out with a new statement. It reads, "It has been the honor of my career to work with President Biden on the achievements that secured his remarkable legacy in American history. It is in consideration of that legacy that I hope President Biden will step away from the presidential campaign. The 2024 election will define the future of American democracy, and we must put forth the strongest candidate possible to confront the threat posed by Trump's promised MAGA authoritarianism. I no longer believe that is Joe Biden." Joining me now is Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. Congressman, thank you for joining me. We'll get right to it. What did you see tonight and in recent days that leads you to believe that Joe Biden should step aside?
Yeah, it's really not about tonight. And one of the really kind of sick aspects of this moment is that we are watching every speech, every rally, every debate and saying, how did he do today? And that's just not the way to think about the presidency of the United States. And look, this is a really hard moment for Democrats. And it's a hard moment for Democrats because loyalty and love and emotion are really important in politics. And by the way, they're probably no more important than, there's probably no one for whom that's more important than, the storytelling Irishman, Joe Biden. And they're really important to politics. It's why, union halls erupt in ecstasy. It's why rallies are unbelievable. It's why people cry when they remember Barack Obama. And that's good. It is good. The problem is it can be taken to an extreme. It is loyalty and loyalty alone, unthinking loyalty, that leads 70 million Americans to continue to back an adjudicated felon, rapist, sexual assaulter who has promised an authoritarian regime. That's an excess of loyalty. And at the end of the day, those things that are so important to politics must make way, as hard as it is, to a very simple question, which is, can we win this race and save our democracy? And it is so unsexy and so unromantic to say, well, what about the polls? What about, the Cook report? Completely dashes the poetry of campaigning. But the hard reality is, and I'm far from the only Democrat who believes this, that the numbers, the trajectory, what Americans feel in their bones right now suggest not only that Joe Biden would lose this race, but that we would lose the Senate and the House. And the stakes are so high that we need to set aside that loyalty and that poetry and that romance and the charge of the Light Brigade, and we all go down together in favor of some really hard-nosed analysis about whether this is the way forward. And, I've been with the president on a number of occasions, and I have looked at those numbers. No president has ever been reelected with the disapproval ratings that our current president, love him as we do, has. And so I will not stand silent as I see a trajectory to an electoral loss that leads to the presidency of Donald Trump and all that he has promised.
Why did you wait till the speech was over? You said it didn't have to do with his remarks tonight. Was it NATO? Did you want to wait until the sort of world stage had been cleared? Can you talk a little bit more about the timing and whether you expect other Democrats will come out with similar statements?
It really, maybe it's a little old fashioned, but, there used to be a statement that partisanship in politics should stop at the water's edge. And yes, I love Joe Biden. I have infinite respect for him. By the way, foreign policy is his strength, as he demonstrated tonight. But no, I very deliberately waited until after the NATO conference to inject, as I knew it would, a political element into the discussion here.
Do you feel like the White House and specifically President Biden is even open to hearing statements like yours? Given his posture tonight, he was fairly combative at the suggestion that he was no longer up to it, that he didn't have the stamina, that he wasn't going to win. Is he in a position to even contemplate that, do you think?
I've done a lot of political campaigns, Alex, and the one attribute of almost every single losing campaign, and I've seen hundreds of them, is that right up until the moment that the numbers are in and you've lost, you believe that you will win. And therefore, again, as I said before, you have to set aside the loyalty, the hope that maybe there's a job 2 years down the road, the emotion, the love, because there is so much love for Joe Biden in favor of a cold, hard appraisal of the facts. You just can't get away from that. And I know that I'm unpopular in lots of quarters because I'm asking us to step away from the love and the loyalty and just say that the numbers suggest that we're going to lose. And look, I respect people who have an opinion different than mine, but the underlying thesis here is that we'll turn this around. And I've heard for months and months and months that the problem is that we haven't communicated the remarkable legislative achievements, the biggest investment in our infrastructure ever, the fact that for Medicare recipients, out-of-pocket costs are capped at $2,000, the fact that insulin is now capped at $35 a month. I've heard over and over and over again that the only problem is that we're not communicating that well. And I would just ask, my fellow Biden supporters, amongst the people who love Joe Biden, whether you have evidence that in the next 5 months, that story will be so exquisitely told by the president that we will turn around the polling, that we will turn what is right now a losing hand into a winning hand. And it pains me to say that because Joe Biden, his legacy is top 10 presidential material. It is absolutely a remarkable legacy. But if you don't look at this in a cold, hard way, you will be complicit in Donald Trump's second presidency. And I'm confident the bench is deep amongst Democrats. It really is. And I don't know who the next candidate should be. I'm not going to, but I could name a dozen Democrats who I believe would not only galvanize African Americans, women, the youth vote, et cetera, but who I'm very confident could convey the message of the remarkable achievements that Joe Biden's administration did better than he's going to be able to do it.
So I'm hearing from you that the time for second chances, if you will, is over. I mean, the Biden campaign, clearly they had a very aggressive schedule for the president. The White House had a very aggressive schedule for the president today. They had a rare press conference. They have a sit-down interview with NBC's Lester Holt on Monday. But what I'm hearing for you is that skeptics, including many in his own party, have seen enough and heard enough. And the time has come for the president to hear from his party resoundingly that he should no longer be at the top of the ticket. My question to you is: there's been so much hand-wringing, both outside of Capitol Hill and inside Capitol Hill, about how Democrats handle this. Is your expectation that there are more like you to follow, more statements like this to follow in the next 24, 36, 72 hours?
Alex, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, this is not part of any coordinated effort. I don't know what my colleagues will do, and I respect each and every one of them. I just, you ask about second chances. This is not an athletic endeavor where you get a mulligan, right? The country and Democrats are in this moment where we're so pleased and perhaps not surprised that the president did a reasonably good job tonight on foreign policy, which he knows so well. But this is what we're focused on, forgetting the fact that the presidency, an office I have never occupied and probably never will, is so horrendously grueling. I mean, forget about a debate with Donald Trump. The presidency is 24/7. You're awoken at 3 a.m. and the Russians are fueling missiles. And oh, by the way, the Iranians are doing something with Hezbollah, and your political opponent has just accused you of being a traitor. I mean, this is a degree of stress that is unknowable to anybody but the president of the United States. And, with as much as I love and respect the man, this is not about whether he can, give a good press conference, right? This is about whether you believe that the trajectory, both for the country, 3 years from now, when the Russians are fueling missiles and Iran is doing something and the political opponents are calling him a traitor, is he able to be up 3 days straight and to make all of the correct decisions, right? This is a job, we're going to watch Olympians in Paris. This is a job that, like them, requires as much perfection as Providence will allow a human being. And people need to ask themselves whether that is the trajectory that they are witnessing. right now, and they need to be honest about it. They need to set aside the love and the loyalty and be honest, because when you answer that question, you're not talking about you. You're not talking about the president. You're talking about the United States of America and its future.
Congressman Jim Himes, thank you for your time. A big news night all around. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
There's nobody that's better, smarter, or a better leader than Viktor Orban. He's fantastic. As you know, the Prime Minister of Hungary, and does a great job. He's a non-controversial figure because he said this is the way it's going to be, and that's the end of it, right? He's the boss.
4 months ago, that is how Donald Trump introduced a crowd of supporters gathered at Mar-a-Lago to his guest of honor, the authoritarian leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban. Now, tonight, the two men met again at Mar-a-Lago just 1 week after Orban met with another close friend of his, Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a post on social media this evening, Orban said of his meeting with Trump, negotiations with President Trump about peace. Good news of the day, he will solve it. Back with me now are Ben Rhodes, Tommy Vitor, and McKay Coppins. Tommy, good news. Viktor Orban and Donald Trump have worked out world peace. Your reaction?
That's wonderful to hear. I mean, you really have to wonder about someone who chooses to spend their time with someone like Viktor Orban. I can't imagine he's a good hang, but Donald Trump, when offered the opportunity to do anything in the world, he finds a way to find himself with the most authoritarian leaders he can find around the world. He talks about how much he envies them and their ability to crush dissent and make decisions and subvert democracy. So wonderful. I'm glad they figured it all out.
Ben, I mean, we're talking about this study in contrast, right? There's Biden with NATO, Zelensky, and then literally a split-screen moment for the global community with Orban and Trump meeting at Mar-a-Lago. This is fresh off of Orban's meeting with Putin. NBC reports that a source familiar with the Trump-Orban meeting assured that any talk of Orban effectively being a back channel to Putin is nonsensical. Do you think it's nonsensical?
I don't think it's nonsensical at all, Alex. And look, first of all, it's not as straightforward, right? Because it's not just Orban who went to see Putin recently. Putin has seen Xi Jinping. He's seen Kim Jong-un. He hosted Narendra Modi on the eve of the summit. I think he's been trying to demonstrate, hey, look, I've got a team as well. And we want to totally overturn the order that is represented by NATO itself. These are the stakes that are happening. And, Orban is something of a model for Trump, right? He did his Project 2025 after he was elected prime minister and kind of transitioning a democracy in an authoritarian, essentially single-party system. Now, the reason I don't think it's fanciful is, first of all, he was just in Moscow. He was just seeing Putin, right, just days ago. And now what is he telling us? That there's good news, there's a peace plan. I mean, Orban is telling us, literally, in that social media post, I talked to Trump about what I talked to Putin about. So he may not be some kind of formal, on the payroll operative going back and forth doing shell diplomacy, but I would be shocked if Orban wasn't sharing some kind of message from Putin or some kind of indication of his conversation with Putin. You really think that Viktor Orban sat with Vladimir Putin for hours in Moscow and then sat with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago and didn't mention anything that he talked to Putin about, didn't pass anything on that came out of that meeting? Again, his Instagram post alone suggests that they talked about Ukraine because he said to talk about a peace plan. So to me, it highlights the stakes here between the bloc of countries and the bloc of strongmen, really, that Trump wants to be a part of versus whether or not NATO can hold together with the support of the United States.
It's, McKay, a remarkably unnerving moment for Americans, for the global community. I want to, get your thoughts on the segment that we had going into this. We had Congressman Jim Himes, who's the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, come out with a statement saying he believes President Biden should remove himself from the top of the Democratic ticket. First of all, from someone like Jim Himes, who is very steeped in international affairs, House Intelligence, obviously, this seems like a meaningful decision. And I wonder the degree to which you think it has an effect on the global community that's watching everything unfold here in America. I know that, from your reporting, they are following on an almost granular level what is going on in America right now.
Yeah, that was one thing that really struck me in my reporting in Europe is just how closely European officials, especially people in NATO, are following everything that's happening in this election. And they know the names of members of Congress. They've met in many cases with them or with members of their staff. So I don't think it goes unnoticed when a senior Democrat with the depth of experience that he has with intelligence, national security, foreign affairs, comes out against Biden. I think the question is going to be in the coming 24, 48 hours, you asked him this question, are we going to see some kind of dam break, right? There has been some reporting to that effect that we might hear from many more Democrats on Capitol Hill in the coming days. I think if that happens, you might be in a situation where you start to see some of President Biden's friends and allies in these European countries who are admirers of his, who have contacts in his administration, also leaning on him. To my knowledge, that hasn't happened yet. We've seen a lot of kind of anonymous anxiety in the reporting. Will those people go on the record? Will they start leaning on President Biden to drop out, given the stakes for the global community? That is what I'm going to be keeping an eye on in the coming days.
Yeah, Ben, the congressman said that his statement tonight didn't have really much of anything to do with the press conference that the president just had, which I thought was quite interesting, right? I mean, on some level, one understands why he would want to wait till the NATO summit was over to do this. But on the other hand, the Biden campaign, I think, and, Democratic onlookers thought that this press conference was a chance for Biden to sort of resurrect his candidacy. And by all initial accounts, it wasn't a bad night for him. Do you worry that the sort of pendulum keeps sort of incrementally swinging back and forth for way too long and becomes actually damaging for the ticket on whole, whoever's at the top of it, unless someone steps in? And do you think anybody is willing to step in? And by that, I mean, do you think Barack Obama is willing to step in here and get his hands dirty?
Well, look, first of all, Sure, you don't like this going on too long, but I'd rather take a couple weeks, Alex, and figure out whether we have the best person to run the campaign against Donald Trump. I don't know that, this is pretty priced in that the debate was bad and the Democrats are upset about this and the Democrats are having a debate about this internally. And so I actually don't know that it matters that much whether it's like, a couple more days or another week. I mean, the reality is there's sand running through the hourglass, right? Because there's a hard deadline with the nominating process. I think, what you see from Jim Hines, though, is, look, that statement was clearly written before the press conference tonight. I thought one of the most powerful things he said is part of the challenge is we don't want to feel like every single time Joe Biden is out on camera that it's some kind of like riveting test. I mean, the very fact that is the dynamic is kind of the problem, actually, that you get through one of these things and it was a slightly better than the ABC interview. So the pendulum inches in one direction. The question is, does the Democratic Party as a collective, and that's most represented by elected officials in Congress, believe that they want to head into the election with Joe Biden as a standard bearer for the sake of winning the presidency and for the sake of not harming and hopefully helping down ballot Democrats? And I think that, it does feel to me like there's obviously a lot of conversations having behind closed doors. This is going to come to the forefront in the next several days.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.